What was the state of Wenatchee when you took office? You were elected in 2011 for the first time.
It was very interesting. Obviously, we had built the Town Toyota Center. We had some really tough financial issues. The city of Wenatchee was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, all over any of the financial news across the country. We were the only municipal default in the United States at that time. And so everyone was looking at us and, how do you fix the mess? And, how do we sort of get ourselves out of it? So I knew going in it was going to be a very interesting start, and it clearly was. And and we were fortunate enough that the community got behind some ideas that we came up with, and lo and behold, we got the Town Toyota Center financing done and did everything we said we were going to do. And but it was a very interesting time.
Refresh our memory about Town Toyota Center. What were the kind of risks that the city was facing from default?
So the city had guaranteed the debt. So there was $44 million of debt that the city had guaranteed. The issue was it a legal guarantee or an illegal guarantee? And ultimately, the Washington State Supreme Court said we couldn't have guaranteed the debt. But, our name was on all of these bonds. And at some point, those bonds need to get paid. And so it was, we had a Securities and Exchange Commission investigation. We were dealing with, filing lawsuits against Global Entertainment and Piper Jaffray and Foster Pep. I mean, we were just trying to juggle as many things as we can while, keeping the building open and operating, keeping the Wenatchee Wild going, and then trying to get in a place where the voters would support a tax increase to help pay for the building. And we were able to do all of that, but it was, I don't know any mayor that ever went to work on day one and had an SEC investigation, a municipal default, and trying to run the day-to-day operations of a city all at the same time. It was quite a time.
You had spent time on the city council before you were elected mayor, and it seems like maybe you had seen some danger signs concerning Town Toyota Center. You were one of the votes against construction proceeding in 2007.
Yeah, it was an interesting time, and I think like anything that you see, you have to look at the entire picture. So the first version of the Town Toyota Center they brought us was a 6,000-seat arena. It could hold actually 2 basketball courts or 2 volleyball courts, so you could host state tournaments. And I think the cost was $28 million or something. And I was in favor of that. I thought the 28 was a number that we could handle based on the economics at the time. And then, of course, that arena, not only did it go from a 6,000-seat arena to a 4,000-seat arena, it also got reduced in size, so you couldn't have the 2 courts, so you couldn't host state tournaments, and the cost went from 28 to 44 million. It didn't go there directly. There was a couple iterations that got there, but like any business person, you go, hey, I'm going to go build my new commercial building, and it's going to be whatever, and it costs this much. And when you get to the end of the day, you go, oh, it's going to be smaller than that and cost way more. You got to stop and make a decision. And so when I looked at the Town Toyota Center at the end, I go, you know what? I don't think we can afford this. I don't think it's going to make enough money to make it go. So I was one of 3 no votes. There was 3 yes votes. A person abstained, and so we went to the mayor at that point to cast the tying vote, and Mayor Johnson at the time voted yes. So we moved forward. Once we moved forward, at least I think my job as a council member isn't to then vote no on everything that comes up. My job is to say, okay, the past 4-3, now we have a contract for a lease agreement with Global. Okay, let's review that in those terms. And so I voted, yes on some of the agreements, but again, the choice as to whether we should build it or not and could we afford it, the answer was no, we couldn't, and that's the reason I voted the way I did. Yeah, it was ironically 4 years later, I'm trying to save it. It's already built, right? And now we basically have a financing problem, and my job was to try to figure out how to get through the financing issues.
Do you look at it now? Is it possible to remember the skyline of Wenatchee without it? It seems like it's kind of a central point in our community culture now.
It is a central point in our community culture, and when you think about during COVID, that was where all the food distribution took place. What would we have done without that? That was the regional vaccination center. What would we have done without that? So when you think about some of the things that have taken place in the meantime and understanding how great it is to have a facility like that for those occasions, quite frankly, we're lucky that we have it. But you never would have predicted that 12 years ago or 16 years ago or whatever. But watching it operate, watching people have fun, and watching it during the time of COVID, we're pretty lucky we have a facility like that.
Well, when you became mayor, once you got beyond that issue of how do we deal with the town Toyota Center crisis, did you feel like you had the skill set coming in, or were there more things for you to learn?
You learn something every single day in this job, right? There's just parts of it that you continue to learn. I thought it was, I got done with I sort of came in and said, okay, let me focus on the town Toyota Center. I'll see what I can do with that. You guys sort of run the day-to-day operations, and when I get this sort of put in a basket, then we'll stop. And it was interesting, we got the tax vote happen on April 15th or so. And so on April 15th, we knew we had a revenue source. We knew we were going to be able to get out of it. It took us till September 30th to get the bonds done, but we sort of knew we had a path forward. So I got done with tax season, the vote passed. I walk into City Hall, and my finance director at the time says, Frank, I need to talk to you. This is going to be great. So we sit down, and she says, here's our budget for that year, which would have been 2012. And I said, yeah. And I'm assuming we're on pace with all that. And she goes, well, that sales tax number that we thought we were going to get, yeah, we're going to get $1.5 million less than that. Thank you very much for that. So now, not only did I fix the town Toyota Center problem, which I thought was, now we have a financial problem inside the city limits of the city of Wenatchee in terms of the government, and we've got to make some hard decisions. So I took a breath and sat down and worked with staff, and that's when we made some decisions like the museum is not going to be a fully city department anymore. We're going to get them out on their own. We're going to contribute money to the association, the nonprofit, and they can run the museum. And so we made some changes to some fire department contracts and stuff, and had a couple of police officers retire to get our budget back in. But I said people at the time, I ran to fix the town Toyota Center. Had you told me that we also had this other problem, I probably wouldn't have run, because I was not prepared for that. But again, coming out of that, we then made some decisions in and around the city on things that sort of get us back on sort of a normal ground where we weren't going to lose a whole bunch of money. And then I put the sustainability committee together, and I said, local business people, what do you want your city to look like? At that point, our revenue was growing at about a 1% clip, and our expenses were growing at a 4 and 5% clip. And so, at the $15 million level, you go, well, you're going upside down by $500,000 a year. And I said, which is 2 or 3 police officers, right? Which is mowing your parks, which is, so what do you want this community to look like? And the business community did a fantastic job of sort of sorting through and giving us some things to look at. And one of the things was, we got to get out of the fire business. Why not consolidate, technically annex West Chelan County Fire District 1, and they can take over the fire? I said, yeah, let's give that a shot. That's something people have talked about for a long time. And lo and behold, that got to a vote of the people, and it passed. I get 85% yes vote. At the same time, they said, you should annex Old Station into the city limits of the city of Wenatchee. That really should be part of the city. That's revenue that can go. And so I went out and met with a bunch of business owners out there. And after 2 separate tries, we annexed Old Station in the city limits of the city of Wenatchee. Most of that happening towards the end of my first term and the very first year or 2 of my second term.
Were you expecting when you became mayor to have a wildfire that destroyed 30 homes in your city and also gutted part of the warehouse district in the center of North Wenatchee Avenue?
Nope, I remember that day just like it was yesterday. That was awful. And, a lot of friends and folks had lost their homes, and just a really tragic event. But I think we've gotten better. We've got a lot fewer of the houses with shake roofs. The new building code required those in their wild urban interface to have extra windows and extra, protection from fires, and we've got that all over our foothills now. So we have jumped on that code. And think about it, we have adopted that code in the city, but the county is yet to adopt that code. And Douglas County has not adopted that code, right? So again, things to think about in terms of difference between cities and counties. I think we led the way once we got through all of that in terms of making sure that we were the leaders, so when that happens again, we have defensible space. We've got building codes that set up and make it so hopefully that never happens again.
So again, aside from the residential damage, there was a leveling that had to happen in the warehouse area,
Yep.
North Wenatchee, Miller. Without that, would things like Confluence Parkway and the TIF district be happening now without that loss of?
No, I don't think it would. Listen, yeah, those fires were devastating. The city jumped in and bought some of the property in and around Northwest Wholesale. That was about the same time that we asked the state of Washington to move off the North Wenatchee Avenue site, which they had since done. So there's lots of things that were sort of interactive going on around there. We were anticipating some redevelopment in the area. One of my biggest disappointments as mayor is at the time, the biggest sort of fruit warehouse that burnt down there was Bluebird, right next to the Town Toyota Center. And Mark Miller and his crew were actually on the roof of the Town Toyota. I mean, they saved the building, but the one next door didn't survive. And, I went to their board and their chairman, and I said, devastated for your loss. Is this really the right place to rebuild? Out by the airport, buy a couple 100 acres, whatever you need, build a new building, easier for trucks to get in and out of. This might be a better spot next to the softball diamonds and the Town Toyota Center for a different kind of development. Let me help you figure out how to do this differently. And I got told not only no, but hell no, we're going to rebuild right here. And they did. And as our city continues to grow, it continues to be awkward in that area when you have all of these trucks trying to get in and out, and there's a hockey game going on, and there's just a lot happening. So I was disappointed that I wasn't able to convince that fruit company to find a different location that would be, but like Northwest Wholesale, once we met with them, they were like, you know what, we need to not be on North Wenatchee Avenue anymore. And they moved out to Baker Flat and love it. We bought the property from them. I offered to buy the property from Bluebird as well. It's like, I'm not here to tell you to leave and figure it out. I mean, I'll buy the land from you and we'll figure it out later. But so some of the companies were very receptive to that, understood what Wenatchee might look like in 25 or 30 years, and others weren't quite as receptive to that.
On the subject of Confluence Parkway, at least 4 businesses are identified as being in the route of that possible roadway. And what kind of negotiations, what kind of talks have you had with those owners?
It's been a little bit tough, and some of it I'll take personal blame for. The kind of project we're doing where it's design build, we're just designing the road. All we've got is sort of like a pencil on a map, right? And we think it's going to look like this, and we think it's going to go here. We know how much money we have. We're not sure how far that's going to go. And so, obviously there's, McDougal is in a spot where it's pretty much, we're convinced that that's where a portion of the road's going to go out in Old Station. On the sort of the Denny's side and some of that, there's some question as to how much money we're going to have. Are we going to be able to get everything we want in that area? So, we've had some communication with them that says, it's a maybe. We're still designing. The problem we have is once we get as far along as we are now, it becomes a federal process. This is a federalized project. So when it's a federalized project, there's a federal process that we have to go through, which means we hire an appraiser. We have the entity, and this is, use Denny's as an example, we will pay for them to hire an appraiser, and the federal government comes in with negotiators and they figure out what the right thing is, right? It's not a city function, so to speak, right? It's somebody else does it. And so we're sort of out of it, right? Other than do we have enough in the budget to do it? The timing, I think sometime next year we'll know, as we're starting to get some ideas and we've got our contractors on board and we're starting to figure stuff out. So I would love it if we could keep the ones that want to be kept. So we'll just have to see how it works. I get it that if you own a business and you need to put in new air conditioning units, do you put them in now or do you wait? Sort of making those business decisions. I think what I would say is you assume you're going to be here for the next 20 years, because if you put in new units now, part of this process is we're buying them from you anyhow, right? So that will improve the value of the building. So I would tell everybody just act like normal, and the project will pay for what it will pay for. So again, I wish we would have handled it differently. I wish there wasn't a federal process that we had to follow, that I could have more communications with these folks. But I got to be really careful, and so does the city staff.
$134 million has been the price tag attached to this so far. Do you expect the next mayor to see a different sticker, a higher sticker in the future on Confluence Parkway?
Yeah, so the math is really, here's the math that we've been using. I think we got 92 from the feds and 85 from the state. So that's 177 million for about a $190 million project. That's sort of the, when you look at the stuff, there's different portions of Confluence Parkway because there's a pedestrian bridge we're building and there's other things that are part of it. So here's the issue. Let's call it a $200 million project. It's going to be over budget, right? I read in Seattle's paper where the 520 is, they thought it would be 700 million and their bid was 1.2 billion or something, whatever. So everything's going to be more expensive. Right?
Construction costs don't tend to go down, they tend to go up.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of, as we knew, there's lots of federal money that got thrown out at people during COVID, and so everyone's got money for projects, and so, listen, I fully expect that those costs will come in higher. And the city will have a couple of opportunities to do one or two things, either go look for some additional money, right? Or say, hey, okay, with this much money, here's what we can build. We can build one underpass, one bridge, blah, 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 blah. We'll leave these two components out maybe and do them later. So we should be thrilled that we got $200 million or $190 million to build what we can build. It's yet to be seen exactly what we'll get with all of the cost increases that people are seeing. So it's not unusual, every project is seeing it. And so the next mayor will have to deal with those sorts of situations and try to figure out what it is that we can and can't build. And so it's just sort of is what it is, right? I figured there'd be, I've said this a bunch of times to folks, you know, if we're building a $5 million project and we're 10% over budget, I can find $500,000. If we're building a $200 million project and I'm 10% over budget, I don't have $20 million. So that's just, the magnitude of the scope of the project makes it so those numbers are so big that we won't be able to plug the gap. So we're either going to have to find funding partners or reduce scope to some degree.
We know that traffic tends to get coagulated on the north end of Wenatchee. We also have seen what happens when one bridge or the other gets blocked, even temporarily. We
Last
see that,
weekend, yeah, a couple days ago, yeah.
We see it like every 2 or 3 weeks, I think. But in the case of Confluence Parkway, we also see when more lanes and bridges get built, more traffic goes onto those lanes and bridges. So is Confluence Parkway really the solution for those problems?
So if you were to say, Jefferson, if you build Confluence Parkway, there'll be no more congestion on North Wenatchee Avenue, okay? That's not going to happen, right? What the projections have all showed is Confluence Parkway is roughly 45,000 cars a day, and in 10 years it'll be 50,000 cars a day, and in 15 years it'll be 60,000 cars a day, right? So you can imagine adding a third more traffic to North Wenatchee Avenue and not having any additional lanes, right? So these lanes will help, right? But it's not going to fix the problem, and it's going to make it easier for folks to get in and out of town. But if you think that it's the magic panacea to all of North Wenatchee Avenue, it is not. But it's the cheapest way, hard to believe, $200 million is the cheapest way to add 2 additional lanes across the Wenatchee River and avoid all of the downtown congestion that you're going to get. And listen, we're putting in another $20 million on North Wenatchee Avenue here pretty quick as well. You can start to see what that looks like with what we did in front of the old WashDOT building, where you've got the curb, tree plantings, wider sidewalk, right? Most of North Wenatchee Avenue will look like that 20 years from now. It'll have a better pedestrian feel. There'll be medians down the middle where you can't make left-hand turns. There'll be U-turns at all the intersections. And you'll have that first one by June of next year when we finish the McKittrick Street interchange, get the traffic signals in, and get the median strips in. That is what that was going to look like. And that will also help with congestion because you won't have as many folks trying to make left-hand turns.
You characterize yourself as a Republican. You've never had to run as a Republican for the city because
it's a nonpartisan, yep.
You've never had an R or a D by your name. But you also endorse Democrats for federal office in a number of cases. You've gotten some static for that. What's the justification?
You know, I always have put on a hat that's what's in the best interest of the city of Wenatchee. That is the entity that I control, right? And I look and see what's going on in Olympia. I look and see what's going on in Washington, D.C. I look at who candidates are. And I look at the things that we're asking from our government to help partner with, and I'm going, which one of these folks would be the best partner for us? Whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, I'm just looking for the best partner. And I did support Maria Cantwell when she ran for U.S. Senate, and I had some reasons why I did that. one of the biggest ones is when, the very first article I read about Susan Hutchinson was running, her first comment was, well, she doesn't work very hard, right? She's lazy. That's not the Maria Cantwell that I work with, right? That woman worked, and so I got tainted by some of the stuff that I heard. And, when Kim Schreier ran against Dino Rossi, I supported Dino the first time. I mean, I supported him, I gave him money. I thought he would be the best choice. And when she won, good for her, she called me, she came to City Hall, and I said, listen, you're my congresswoman. Confluence Parkway is a big thing for us, and I want to work with you and make sure that happens. And she was great to work with. And over those years, we became friends, and I thought she did a remarkable job for us. Does she vote on everything I would vote for? No. But is she responsive? Yes. Has she been in I joke with her sometimes. I introduce her places, and I say, you're in Wenatchee more than I am. And she has this huge congressional district she has to operate. So she's a hard worker, she's smart, and I didn't have any problem supporting her. I thought she would be the best representative for our region. I think she continues to be. So I'm way more probably independent than Republican. I agree with a lot of the Republican theories and less government, less regulation, lower taxes, those sorts of things, pro-business, pro-capitalism. Those are things that are basic to me. But I tend to support the person more than the party. And my parents were sort of that way when they grew up. They just supported the person more than the party. But they were Republicans. But they were sort of Dan Evans, John Spellman Republicans. I don't know what that is anymore, right? Because the Republican Party is so where you're at. We're sort of in the middle, I think.
What do you think has been the biggest crisis, Frank, of your mayorship, if it's not Town Toyota Center, if it's not the Sleepy Hollow fire?
I don't know. I think obviously the Town Toyota Center was the one thing that we had to get done, or we couldn't do anything else, right? I would tell you, I don't know that the Pybus Market would be built had we not got the Town Toyota Center thing figured out. Mike Walker was debating whether to put the money in. The port had bought the land and was sort of holding it, and we were all looking at each other going, is this community, can it do something? And I think they waited until it was clear that we got the tax vote the way we wanted it and we had a way out, and Mike said, yeah, we need to jumpstart this. So I think you weren't going to get anything else done until you got the Town Toyota Center done. So you couldn't have any of the annexations. None of that was going to happen until you fixed the one problem. And I think not only did you have to fix the problem, but you had to have some credibility to take on these other projects, right? You couldn't have, if you don't get that done, you don't have any credibility on annexation of a fire district or annexation of Old Station, right? So I think using the credibility that we gained by doing the first one allowed us to do the annexations, allowed us to do some of the other things. So Jefferson, I don't know how to look at any of that other than you couldn't have done the one without the first one. And I didn't rest on my laurels and say, hey, I did what I said I was going to do, I'm out of here, right? It's like, let's attack the next problem, let's attack the next problem. And, I think I was telling someone the other day, the thing that I regret probably the most is, I'm sort of a fixer, right? You call me, you want your pothole fixed, I could probably get that done tomorrow, right? Or the next day. Or if there's something going on, we can get a police department guy on speeding cars. And there's stuff that we can do that we can control. I can't control the homeless issue. I can't control the fentanyl issue very well. Some of the mental health issues. These are sort of nationwide issues. They're not limited to Wenatchee. And I told someone the other day, I said, the reason I didn't run again was probably those issues, right? Because I want to fix stuff. And this is stuff that's really difficult to fix. You can work on the edges and try to make it better, but I can't fix it like I can fix your pothole. And this gentleman looked at me and said, well, Frank, it's not your fault. This just happens everywhere. And I said, that doesn't change it for me. It's not a question of whose fault it is. The community doesn't care whose fault it is. The community wants it fixed. And when you have Martin v. Boise, and you got the Blake decision, and you got other Supreme Court decisions that sort of tie our hands, it really makes it hard. And it's easy to backseat quarterback and say, yeah, I'm going to fix the home, and I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to fix that. But when you really look at what the laws say we can and can't do, it's very difficult. And so I think that frustration really sort of sat with me and said, I think that's hard for me. And then I think at the end of the day, that was probably the one issue that said, it's time for someone else to take a look at this.
And other leaders have pointed to those court decisions that you mentioned, the Boise decision, is how we handle the homeless, how we deal with their living situation. Yep. There has to be a shelter option for them. They cannot be moved off public spaces easily without one.
Yes, and we are building a 43-bed pallet shelter right now as we speak. We'll have it up in April. But, much like the safe parks, we got Safe Park 1 and Safe Park 2, right? And I think they have been overall hugely successful. Safe Park 1 filled up right away. We knew we were going to have to build a second one, and we built it. And now we have another 20 or so folks in campers that aren't in 1 or 2 because they're full. Some are because they don't abide by the very basic rules and they've been kicked out. But it's like, yeah, we did it, but now the issue is still sort of around, and way better than it was. But if we build these 43 pallet shelters, that takes care of 43. But what if another 30 show up from Spokane or some other place the next day, right? It's sort of with us, I think. And when we bought the Safe Park 2 property out in Old Station, one of my questions with staff was, we got half of it built up and the other half we're leasing back and eventually will be something else. And it's like, is this going to be here forever? Is that just what it is, right? Is it just going to be that? Or will it change over time and we won't have that? And it'll be a little commercial center or an industrial spot and the city will keep what it needs for its wastewater treatment station and stuff like that. So I don't know. It was the right thing to buy the property. It's the right thing to do Safe Park 2. I just don't know in 10 or 15 years if it's still there, if that's still what we have to do to provide housing for folks.
Frank, what was the most fun about being mayor?
Oh, listen, working with a really great staff. Jefferson, you know me for a long time. I like to have a sense of humor. I like to laugh. I like to make fun of myself. So I think if you did this job without a sense of humor, it would be a really tough job. So I've enjoyed laughing with folks, making fun of government, right? Yeah, sometimes you hear me say things like, yeah, we're moving at the speed of government, right? And sometimes we actually get to move faster than that. But I don't take it so seriously. I say this all the time. You've heard it. I became mayor and I looked at a contract that Jim Lynch did and I go, God, what was he thinking? Why did the city stop its water system at Maple Street? I mean, that makes no sense. And then I look and say, well, God, Earl Tilley, and Dennis, and I'll guarantee you that Mike Poirier is going to walk in 3 years going to go, what was Kuntz thinking? Why did he want to do that? Or why did he think that was the right thing to do? So I've never looked at it and said, hey, listen, we're perfect, right? We're just making the best decisions we can with the information we have at the time. And it's that's all you can do. And so I fully expect that Mike will look at things that I did and think that it's not right. I don't feel bad about it, right? I don't feel, it's like we made the best decision we could. We're talking about spending some money on the convention center, right? It needs to get updated. We're going to spend $14 million, a little bit more. And I told the council, I said, we didn't make the decision to build the convention center. That was made in 1978. Our job is to go, how do we maintain it? How do we keep it up? What do we do to keep it to be a great spot in our community, right? Same with the museum. We weren't the decision makers in 1962 to accept the federal post office as a city building and its maintenance requirements for the next zillion years, right? But we have to figure out how to deal with that, right? The things we're going to hand the next generation are the foothills. So we've accepted the foothills as city property, right? Who's going to maintain the foothills? It's no different than who's going to maintain the convention center, who's going to maintain the museum, who's going to maintain the foothills. And we've put some money this year in our budget, $40,000 to the land trust to help with maintenance. But understand all of these, so what I'm handing to the next generation is maintenance of foothills. Other people handed us stuff that we have to deal with the best that we can. And I just keep leaving that as a perspective that we're, what are we leaving them, the decisions we're making, and understanding some of what we're doing is just dealing with stuff that other people have given us.
If you leave a note in your drawer, Frank, for the next mayor to find, and he doesn't know it's there, what's the note say? It's
sort of what I think George Bush gave to Bill Clinton. If he's successful, then we're all successful, right? And if Mike Poirier does a great job, then our city's going to be in a better spot, right? And he needs to do it his way. I've told him, don't follow my footsteps, make it yours, make it the way you want to do it. And I think he'll do a great job. So I am not going to be a backseat quarterback, right? It's almost his now. I'm moving out of my office on Friday, so he will sort of have the reins, other than I have to sign everything. And it's amazing how quickly, when you have a mayor-elect, that no one, the old mayor doesn't really matter anymore. It's really a heavy transition. And I'm handing stuff to him and said, go for it. So I wish him nothing but the best of luck. We have a great staff, and he'll get to work with really great people. But it's a hard job. And I think, I've said this quite a few times, I think until you sit in that position, you don't know. I looked at Mike yesterday after the 14 things I told him, and I could just tell that he's just processing, right? All of those things. The longer you do it, the easier it becomes. But there's a lot there. I just want him to be successful, because if he's successful, our city's successful. And that's all I want.
Well, Frank Kuntz, Mayor of Wenatchee from 2012 through 2023, thank you very much for being here.
Yep, thanks, Jefferson.
Really appreciate it.
Yep.
You're watching the NCWLIFE channel.